demons behind the scenes to get everything working. So welcome to this event. We're looking at the future of carbon neutral travel in Leicester, and particularly what that might mean for businesses and organisations in the city. My name's Andrew Reeves. I'm from De Montfort University's Institute of Energy and Sustainable Development. We've been working with the City Council looking at energy, sustainability and climate issues for many years, supporting them through research and partnership working. And what we're looking at today is the challenge of climate change in the future for our city. So you're probably aware of all the media attention I think climate has had, particularly over this summer. Lots of extreme weather events, new announcements about policies, and you may also be aware that as well as the national target for the UK to be net zero emissions by 2050, we also have a target in our city for Leicester to be carbon neutral by 2030. So a very big ambition, which of course has implications for many areas of life, energy, our homes, food, etc., but also for transport and how we get around. So you're probably aware of many of the changes happening around this already in the city. You've probably seen new cycle lanes, perhaps some of the new electric buses running at the Park and Ride, the work being done to rebuild St Margaret's bus station to be a carbon neutral bus station. There's a lot underway and there's a lot more planned. And this event is linking with the transport strategy for the city, which is currently out for consultation. It has been over the summer. I think it's open for another week or two for responses. And what I'm going to do this evening, over an hour, is hear from the City Council, so from Adam Clark, who leads on environment and transport for the City Council, and from Andrew Smith, who's been developing a lot of the specific plans around transport for the city. And we'll also hear from some DMU academics who've been working with the council and researching these areas around what some of the options might be for transport in the future. So we're going to hear from Stephen Ison, Lucy Budd, and Rupert Gammon. And then all being well, we'll even have some time for some questions and answers at the end. So as well as introducing the event, I'm going to try and keep everyone to time, so we do have that time for questions, because I'm sure you'll have a lot you want to ask. So I think without further ado, I'll hand over to Adam and Andrew. I'm not sure who'll pick up the reins first from the council, just to introduce the state of play from their perspective and what they're thinking.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. That's going to be it's a real pleasure to join you all this evening to frame our local transport plan consultation around the COP26 agenda. And it's obviously a key milestone and actually should act as a key step change for decarbonisation globally, but particularly in cities and cities like Leicester. Cities are seen to be responsible for 70% of carbon emissions. And that's why I thought it was really important that Leicester declared its climate emergency, amongst the first cities to declare climate emergencies in 2019. Within the subsequent action plan and strategy that we developed, we announced our ambition to be net zero by 2030. And we're now developing a roadmap that will see us develop those actions up to 2030. We have 25% of our emissions are from transport in the city, and it's what I call a sticky source of emissions. It's not something that really tends to shift, which is an issue for us. 60% of that comes from private vehicles, and we have very limited control as a local authority over emissions from transport. And actually, generally, the City Council itself is responsible for less than quite substantially less than 5% of total emissions for the city. Yet we see ourselves, and indeed we are, an incredibly important leader in taking our city to net zero, and that's why it's really important that we have a strong local transport plan with strong policy in place to support that ambition. So I'm going to hand over to Andrew now to take you through our emerging local transport plan. And so thank you very much for listening to me this evening, and over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Adam. And thank you for inviting me this evening to talk about the city's local transport plan and our proposals for a ambitious workplace park. It's very timely because we are, as Andrew has said, we are partway through a consultation exercise on those documents, and we are meeting a range of different organisations, and it's incredibly helpful that we've been invited this evening. Greatly interested to hear what others have to say with any questions you'd like to pose once I've got through the presentation. So my name is Andrew Smith, and I am the Director of Planning, Development and Transportation at the City Council, just to be clear on my role. And that's important because it covers a range of placemaking issues, and a lot of which goes to the heart of the decarbonisation agenda. So if we could have the first slide, please. Thank you. These are the two documents we're currently consulting on, the Leicester Local Transport Plan and the Workplace Parking Levy Initial Consultation Document. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So I'm going to be talking about why we need a new local transport plan. I'll say a little bit about the government's recently published decarbonisation plan for transport. I'll talk about some of the projects that we've been delivering and plan to deliver, which Andrew's touched on. Those form an important platform for the work going forward. I'll take you through the challenges and opportunities as we see them, our transport vision and priorities, then say a little bit about where the funding comes from or could come from to deliver those priorities, say a little bit about our consultation timetable going forward, which we'll hope you'll stay involved in, and then certainly be interested in taking any questions. Okay, next slide. So why do we need a new local transport plan? Lots of reasons. Our existing plan is a little long in the tooth now. We have a new context. We've talked about climate emergency, the air quality agenda, the health agenda. We've got a city that continues to grow very substantially, both within the city boundary and outside of the city boundary. So good reason to revisit the plan. And of course, the plan will act as a guide for resource allocation and to secure funding into the future. So I'll say a little bit more about the context that we have recently received from government through their decarbonising transport plan. Next slide. Thank you. So I think, as has been mentioned, some of this is now either already or to be embodied in law. So the net zero emissions target nationally by 2050. As Adam has said, I think this is important for us because transport represents around about a quarter of UK and local greenhouse gas emissions. It's the largest domestic greenhouse gas contributor. And as Adam says, it's been sticky, changing, moving the transport element of greenhouse gases has been relatively flat over the last 30 years. So we do need a step change in scale and pace of what we're doing. And in tackling decarbonisation, we can also impact on those other priorities, the air quality, congestion, etc. Okay, next slide. So just a couple of slides just to bring that to life, drawn from the government's document. Walking and cycling is quite clearly a big priority nationally and locally. Lots of reasons why we want to, and government wants to continue promoting walking and cycling. It creates jobs. It has a big impact potentially on CO2 savings and air quality benefits. The government are investing monies into this, but we think probably that will be falling some way short of what's required to deliver the vision and the targets. And one of those stretch targets, if you like, is that by 2030 in cities like Leicester, half of all journeys should be cycled or walked, which I'm sure for some of you you'll see as a pretty eye-watering target. And also by 2040, and this is pretty much in line with where we want to be, They're suggesting that we will have a world-class cycling and walking network throughout England. Okay, next slide. Thank you. Benefits of cycling and walking clearly extend into the health world. The costs of inactivity are writ large, literally, on the slide in front of you. The benefits through well-being of exercise, the benefits to business, the benefits to individuals, productivity of workers, etc. All of those things are, I think, well rehearsed, and the government's decarbonising strategy puts those front and centre. Thank you. And also in terms of buses, again, a significant contributor, and government are putting some monies into this, and we're trying to secure those monies, more of which later. It has obviously there's a big relevance to this in terms of industry, supporting the manufacture of buses with the jobs that sort of go alongside that. So it has an important economic role, I think, the focus around buses and zero emission buses. Thank you. So we're expected to embed the agenda through our locality, through planning and transport policy. There will be monies available, as I say. I think they will fall some way short. And the government will be providing support for local authorities to reduce transport carbon emissions. We've reviewed the document initially. It came out about the same time as we were publishing our document for consultation. But we feel that the proposals in the local transport plan and those in the accompanying workplace parking levy documents are well aligned with the government plans. Next slide, please. So what have we been doing in the last year, which corresponds to the election of a city mayor, an elected city mayor for the city, Sir Peter Soulsby. We've been investing very heavily in connecting Leicester, improving streets and spaces in the city centre, creating cycleways, linking out to the neighbourhoods. Lots of investment in bus priority measures through the National Productivity Fund. A focus around air quality, encouraging bus operators to convert their fleet to more environmentally friendly buses. And that's helped us to bring our levels of CO2 down quite considerably and within EU target limits. And of course, most recently, the work that we've done through our transport recovery plan to enable people to cycle more freely and walk more freely through the city, responding to the COVID-19 challenges that we've faced. Next slide. So we're currently working on a programme of activity that will take us through to 2024, funded through the Transforming Cities Fund. So we've invested in 11 electric buses serving all of our park and ride sites. We're partway through the delivery of 500 electric bikes as part of our bike share scheme, and those are largely concentrated in and around the city centre. As Andrew's mentioned, we are rebuilding our St Margaret's bus station. That is well advanced now. The demolition's complete, and we're starting to rebuild the bus station and indeed improve the streets and spaces around it. And then we've got a number of projects that are delivering active travel, cycling and walking enhancements through local neighbourhoods. Thank you. So turning to buses, we also have a lot of work underway working with bus operators. We're developing a new enhanced bus partnership that will see commitments on the local authority and the bus operator side. As I note, we've electrified 3 park and ride sites. We are waiting with bated breath for the announcement of a funding bid that we put into government for £50 million worth of electric buses through their Zebra initiative. That would bring 98 new electric buses into the city, would actually mean 30% of the total city bus fleet would be electrified, which would be amazing if we are successful. So fingers and everything else crossed on that. A lot of work on ticketing and fares, and we're developing this concept, this branding concept of a green lines network, which I'll say more about later. Okay. So challenges and opportunities that underpin the plan. I've talked about those carbon targets and ambitions. The city is continuing to grow. That will cause us challenges, difficulties and challenges through congestion if not addressed, and sustainable transport we see as the answer to that. We have a significant proportion of physically inactive residents in the city. Many of the journeys that are made in the city by car are short journeys, under 2 kilometres, around about a quarter, and we think that those are a low-hanging fruit, if you like, in terms of converting to from car use to walking and cycling. We do know that bus journeys have declined nationally over a long period of time. We were starting to see that recover, but of course COVID-19 has interrupted that pattern, and only recently are we starting to see patronage increase to significant levels in buses once again, up to about 60%. We have a compact city. We do believe that there are good opportunities because of the dense nature of the city to get more people travelling by bus. It's only a 30-minute journey to the edge of the city, and around about half of the population is within about 10-minute cycle ride of the city centre. So again, good opportunities to connect people with better infrastructure. Next slide. Thank you. So we have a transport vision in our new plan, a carbon neutral, growing, healthy, accessible and connected city with clean air supporting a high quality of life and travel experience for people, and of course a vibrant local economy. There are a number of ambitions set out in the plan to 2036. I'll just pick out one or two. 100% zero emission vehicles follows the decarbonisation ambition. More people working from home. We want to encourage people to make sustainable modes of travel their first choice, whether it be for longer or shorter trips. And of course, longer trips are more likely to be targeted towards bus travel, shorter trips, walking and cycling. We have a focus around our neighbourhoods, whether it's a city centre neighbourhood or indeed the outlying neighbourhoods, creating this concept of a 15-minute city. So can we devise transportation means that bring people within around about 15 minutes of the services that they need through the development of infrastructure and other transport initiatives? And finally, this concept of a rush hour free city, we've been used to that over the last 18 months or so. Can we lock that in? Can we deliver a series of transport trends that reduce traffic during those peak periods? Okay. So 3 key themes: connected corridors and hubs, focusing on improving commuter corridors for buses, cycling and walking, improve park and ride sites, and also looking at our transport hubs, building on the new bus stations at Haymarket and the St Margaret's bus station, and looking towards transformation of the railway station. The second theme is connected healthy neighbourhoods. So as I say, a focus around neighbourhoods, investment in neighbourhoods, better cycling and walking infrastructure, better local bus networks, fewer and cleaner vehicles. And finally, managing demand for car use, looking at parking management, coordination, tariffs, more work on behaviour change, building on what we've already done, better and smarter technology applications to improve transportation, and of course a workplace parking levy, more of which later. Thank you. So looking at those in more detail in terms of the priorities for the next 10 years, we have this concept of a green lines public transport network where we would see electric tram-like buses serving the core routes, the core radial routes and orbital routes across the city, picking up the key employment sites, retail sites, hospitals and universities, for example. So that's the longer term ambition. In the shorter term, we are, as I say, delivering zero emission electric buses, hoping to receive funding to expand that. And we're also looking to deliver additional park and ride sites to the south and east of the city. As far as active travel, cycling and walking goes, we want to continue to expand the network that we're building. We want that to be a world-class network of cycling and walking routes, and we want that to create and support safer neighbourhoods and cleaner air across the whole city. And then finally, some of you may be aware, we've recently submitted a bid for levelling up funds, £23 million towards improvements of Leicester railway station, serving both passengers and also creating an environment for regeneration in that area and improved public realm, connecting the station better to the city centre. Okay. So funding historically has been a combination of central government, regional and local funding. One of the difficulties with that is it's intermittent. You can only apply for it when it arises. You're not always successful. And so what we're looking to move towards is a more reliable ongoing source of funding, which is why we're focusing on the potential that a workplace parking levy might bring us to deliver that reliable funding over at least 10 years. And you can see on the slide the sorts of benefits that that's generated in Nottingham, with over 75 million received since 2012, levering in very substantial sums of money from government. Thank you. So I'll quickly take you through what a workplace parking levy means for the city, and a lot more work to do on this at the moment. We're building a business case, but it is a charge on employers for parking places used by car commuters. Employers can choose to pass that on if they wish. It applies to businesses, public sector and education organisations. There are some exemptions for customers, deliveries, visitors, residential parking, public parking and car parks. All of the monies raised are ring-fenced for transport. The overall aim is to encourage sustainable transport and deliver those wider environmental, health and economic benefits. Thank you. So we are looking at the key features. We believe that it should operate across the whole city area. The charge we're looking at the moment around about £550, which equates roughly to an annual bus pass from one of the main operators. That's about £2 per working day. We're looking at exemptions and discounts, working closely with Nottingham City Council on all of this, and we're assessing the environmental, economic inequalities aspects. We'll go into a full business case. Thank you. So lots of work to support businesses on the introduction of a workplace parking levy, helping them with car parking management, car sharing, additional connecting cycleways, behavioural support, negotiating deals with bus operators. So we would look to support businesses very much on the introduction of a WPL. Thank you. Timetable. So we're currently in the process of consulting, as I've said, up to the 17th of September. I'd encourage you to get involved and submit your thoughts and comments. Supporting comments are welcome, but also challenging comments are equally welcomed. We will look to publish the results of the consultation later in November, and then we hope to move to a formal business case consultation on a workplace parking levy around November, December time. And then into spring next year, should that all move forward, we'll be pulling together the final business case, which we'll need to submit to the Secretary of State for approval. And then if approved, we would start mobilisation for workplace parking levy in the autumn of next year, with charging commencing in 2023. Okay. And that, I believe, is it. So thank you.
Okay, so thank you to Adam and to Andrew for laying out the issues we face and the ideas that the City Council are putting forward. I think as someone who works in sustainable development, it's very exciting to hear the vision the council has, and now it's that real challenge on the ground of actually making it happen. So wonderful to hear that introduction. I don't want to take too long. I want to give space for our next two speakers. So We've got various colleagues at De Montfort University working on these issues. So first of all, we're going to hear from Stephen Ison, who's going to be representing work that he's been doing with Lucy Budd, looking at future transport options for Leicester. So I think Steve will lead the talking, and Lucy will be on hand for Q&A later. So over to you, Steve.
Well, thank you very much. Be good. Could we have the slides up? That'd be good. Just to say that, as Andrew said, myself and Lucy, both transport academics at DMU. I'm going to say a little bit about the options towards a carbon neutral travel situation in Leicester. And hopefully that will stimulate a bit of debate at the end. So the second slide gives you the overview of the presentation. I'm going to introduce very quickly an economic model, which hopefully will form the frame to discuss the options. And I'm going to talk about 5 options. Andrew has already mentioned them, but demand management, public transport, active travel, flexible working, and technological change, which is something that Rupert will also come on to talk about in a short while. And then I put a slide in on the impact that COVID has had on this whole environment, whole situation. And then I'll seek to draw a few conclusions. Of course, this list is not exhaustive. There are other measures that we could have talked about: car sharing, the role of the travel plan, which arches a number of these measures, carpooling, demand responsive transport, and so on. Okay, so let's move on to the simple economic model. I thought it was quite useful. I haven't got much time, but I'll just talk you through that. On the horizontal axis, you've got economic activity within any city, and transport activity, which goes with that. Transport being a derived demand, so the more activity, the more transport activity that you have. And of course, activity creates, as Andrew said, a level of emission. And so you can measure those along the axis. Difficult to measure benefits and costs, but let's assume that you can. And on the vertical axis are the costs and the benefits of that. Well, of course, we undertake journeys, and this is from the private car perspective. We undertake journeys because we want to get to work, we want to involve ourselves in retail, and so on and so forth, leisure. And the benefits from that can be measured by that marginal benefit curve. So that is the area underneath that marginal benefit curve of area A, B, C. Of course, in that activity, there are external costs, the ones that Adam and Andrew have been talking about, and that is the marginal external cost curve, which is measured by that area B, C, D. If we were at point T1, where we're maximizing the benefits to the individual, there would be the costs of that would outweigh the benefits. The movement between T2 and T1, the benefits are C, but the costs are C plus D. So there is what is called a welfare loss of that area D. And essentially, that's part of what we've been talking about today with Andrew's talk. If we're closer to zero, which clearly we were in the pandemic period, there's no activity. Of course, there's no external cost, but clearly that is, problematic in terms of economic activity, etc. So a move from A to T, from 0 to T2 means that there are costs, of course, and that's area B, but there are also the benefits of A plus B and the major benefits of that area A. So an economist would be seeking to try and get something close to T2, seen as the optimum, if there is such a thing, the optimum level of pollution, congestion, so on and so forth. Okay, so if we use that as our frame, moving on to the next slide, let's just have a look at one or two of those options. First of all, demand management and the private car, public transport, active travel, flexible working, and technological change. And we can look at all of those in terms of that diagram. So the next slide looks at demand management. I'll quickly go through this because Andrew has mentioned it, but the use of the private car. Well, you can have a market-based approach to the use of the private car through the price mechanism. Andrew has mentioned the workplace parking levy, but there's also bridge user charging, which has been talked about for quite some period of time. They act on the demand side, local authorities have the power, if they want, to introduce either or both of those measures in part or all of their particular area. And the aim is to change travel behaviour. So if we go into the next slide, I won't spend much time on this, but a road user charge is well established in transport economic circles. It's setting a price equal to the external cost, deceptively easy. You just charge in the same way that you charge for a price for a bottle of milk or a loaf of bread, but quite difficult to implement. And the workplace parking levy, which Andrew has mentioned, imposing a levy on employers providing liable car parking spaces at the workplace. To date, there are only two schemes, essentially, the congestion charge in central London and the Nottingham Workplace Parking Levy, which was introduced in 2012. There's also things such as the ultra low emission zone, which is operating in London, which was introduced in 2019. That mirrors at the minute the congestion charging area. So if you go into that zone, it's £15 for the congestion charge and £12.50 if your vehicle doesn't meet various emission standards. So quite an expensive trip. Instead of £15 and £12.50. In a few weeks' time, on the 25th of October, in fact, the zone will be expanded to create a single larger zone. Now, the aim of these two measures is to shift that marginal benefit curve to the left. So it moves you in the direction of that point T2, which I mentioned on the 2 slides ago. So a demand management measure. The next one, which Andrew mentioned at great length, is public transport and to encourage the use of public transport, again, to change travel behaviour. That comes in various forms. Improving the infrastructure, provision, the quality, the reliability, the frequency, and the information flows, such things as real-time passenger information. But of course, there's a cost involved in that. And again, there's a role there for a workplace parking levy, because as has been said, you know, the revenue raised from that will be hypothecated and can go to encourage and improve the public transport provision. So it's an integrated approach, I would say, public transport and a workplace parking levy. And again, this one, is the same as the previous one, would look to seek to shift the marginal benefit curve to the left to enhance the reputation of the city in which we work and live. And what has been mentioned are the Green Line's electric bus network and the new improved park and ride sites. All a useful way and an option of moving towards a carbon neutral travel situation. The third one is, again, has been mentioned, is active travel on the next slide. High on the agenda, the infrastructure for that, cycle lanes, walking routes, and so on and so forth. That's at the macro level. And of course, there's work that can be done at the workplace. At the micro level, cycle racks, maintenance facilities, secure cycling provision, showers, and so on. And Andrew mentioned the role of e-bikes, which has been rolled out. So there's a link there between the technology and active travel. And of course, the benefits that derives in terms of health and well-being of citizens and the users within the city. The aim of that, of course, is to impact on that marginal external cost curve. So to change the slope, the gradient of it. So in the diagram, it was where it was, and therefore to move that downwards to the right in order to reduce the carbon emissions by an alternative form of transport. I put in a slide, the next slide, on flexible working, the use of Teams. We're using a type of facility now. Of course, but there are others, Teams, Zoom, Skype, and we've worked in this environment for quite some time now, given the pandemic, and there's a shift, I think, of mindset there, and that clearly is going to impact on emissions, on carbon, although who knows quite where that will end up. I looked at yesterday's Times and just read it. You read the title of the main headline on the front page. and a little bit of for what it said in the text. The old normal, rush hour returns as Britain goes back to work, with millions of workers returning to the office and the school term starting in England and Wales. Rush hour traffic in some areas reached levels last seen before the coronavirus crisis. Roads in London, Birmingham, Wolverhampton, Nottingham, Leicester and Liverpool were as busy as 2 years ago. I've got the correspondent's name. I don't know where they got that information from, but that's what they said on that front page. So, flexible working, that will impact, of course, have implications for the city centre, for the retail sector, hospitality, office provision, and so on and so forth. But the idea of that, again, is to move the marginal benefit curve to the left to try and get you somewhat close to that T2 point. The final one is technology, and Rupert is going to say a bit about that, but probably not about these points. But e-scooters, e-bikes, which Andrew mentioned, electric vehicles, and also facilities with phone apps for booking parking spaces, alerting you when. So more efficient use of the provision that is out there, alerting you when public transport is busy, so you can change your journey accordingly. They're the five. I don't think I really need to say much more about those, other than to go on to the next slide, which is all about the implications for COVID, and of course, this is still panning out. But will it change travel behaviour? Is there still a reluctance to use public transport? Yes, the promotion of active travel as an alternative, social distancing in the workplace, the impact on economic activity in a city like Leicester or any city. Is it short term? Is it a knee-jerk reaction? But will we move back, as that article says on the Times? There'll be a long-term old normal. And of course, maybe there's a reluctance to change. So I thought I'd put that slide in. And just a couple of conclusions in the next slide. Oh, maybe that's it. Maybe I missed out the conclusion. There we are. I think that's me done, Andrew.
Okay. So thank you, Stephen and Lucy, because that was a joint effort, of course. Really good to hear these issues looked at through different lenses, and so that really got me thinking the kind of the economic model lens, what that might offer. Also, that lovely overview of the different options available for thinking about sustainability and transport. I want to move us on because time is running out, so we're still going to finish at 6:30. So I'm going to bring in Rupert and just remind you all to throw in questions if you have them. Even if we don't have time for them in this session, we will make the City Council aware of what is being asked, so they know what's important to people as this conversation unfolds. So over to Rupert.
Okay, hello. Can we get my title slide up? Well, that's happening. Yes, just let me introduce myself. I work with Andrew Reeves in the same department in the Institute of Energy and Sustainable Development at De Montfort University. And one of the subjects that I carry out research on is low carbon transport systems. First slide, please. So we've covered a whole range of types of low carbon transport, including walking and running, and things like that, which I'm not really going to talk about too much, because what I'm going to focus on is technology. Okay, bicycles are technology, but I'm not really going to focus on muscle power. I'm going to look more at the kind of vehicles or vehicular transport, because this is a particular kind of challenge. And because I've got a very short time, I don't really have time to cover all the huge variety of electric and soon to be fuel cell vehicles that are coming online now and becoming available in the market. So I will be talking generically about them. So this, what you see here is a whole range of ways of being able to travel either low carbon or even zero emission. And I'm going to focus in that yellow box at the top really on battery electric vehicles and fuel cell electric vehicles. And for it to be described as low carbon or even zero emission, the energy source that powers the vehicle must be clean in itself, which predominantly means renewable energy, could be wind, could be solar, could be hydro, and depending on your opinion of nuclear power, could be nuclear power. So I'm calling it, for short, just a clean energy source. And all of those actually naturally go straight to electricity. So this is why the electricity grid is essentially going to be the future of our energy for transportation. This is fairly obvious when you think about recharging electric vehicles, recharging battery electric vehicles, as distinct from fuel cell electric vehicles, which run on hydrogen. They're fueled by hydrogen, and the cleanest, greenest way of making hydrogen is via electrolysis. That splits water into hydrogen and oxygen. So the hydrogen becomes a fuel for the fuel cells. And as I've said, as long as that comes from a clean source, then again, you're getting clean energy. And the difference between battery electric and fuel cell electric vehicles is essentially about long distance and heavy load. So if it's a city run around with a light load, it's more suited to battery electric. If it's longer distances and heavy loads, so now we're talking about trains and trucks and so on, even ships, then you're going to need to move to hydrogen to give you the amount of energy you need to travel those kind of distances. And that also means very rapid refueling times, just like filling a car with petrol, as opposed to long recharging times that we have to deal with electric vehicles. I'm not going to get into things like ships and planes, but you can see from this diagram that there's a route to that via combining biofuels with hydrogen. And again, I have to caveat that not all biofuels are carbon neutral. So again, you've got to be very careful about that. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. To dig into that a little bit deeper about the energy supply chain, the only way to ensure that you are low carbon is to make sure you're smart about the way you do your electric vehicle recharging or your hydrogen production. Because if you just plug in anytime you feel like it, there will be times where you're adding real strain to the electricity grid, and you may be using a very dirty mix of energy generation. Whereas if you're smart, you can choose to recharge at times where there is good, cheap, and clean electricity available. So that means typically when there is a high input of renewable energy, so sunny periods or windy periods where we're harvesting lots of renewable energy, that's a good time to be plugging in your vehicle to recharge it, because actually that means the carbon footprint of the grid at that time is much greener. And the way to encourage people to do this is by having time of use electricity tariffs. That means they change depending on the time of day or the time of the week or the month or whatever, or the time of the year. So with time of use tariffs, we hope to encourage people to switch on their charger or their electrolyzer if they're a garage forecourt making hydrogen fuel for the fuel cell vehicles, to switch those devices on when the price is low, and the price should be low when the energy is plentiful and green. So to do this, we are trying to shape the demand of electricity that goes into the transport sector. And this reduces the need for expensive electricity storage in stationary grid-based systems, because the storage actually takes place in the vehicle, because electric vehicles have large batteries. So a fleet of millions of vehicles across the country adds up to a huge capacity of energy storage, electricity storage. And again, that storage can time shift energy demand over a matter of hours or even days. With hydrogen production and smart electrolysis, you can store even bigger amounts of energy, and you can time shift that demand by a matter of days and weeks, which suits the the weather patterns that will bring in the wind energy or the solar energy to this country. So this has a way of, as well as producing low carbon transport, actually providing fantastic grid balancing services to the electricity network. And this saves a huge amount of money across the whole system. Next slide, please. So, this basically shows that there is this kind of symbiotic relationship whereby if you want loads of renewable energy on your electricity power grid, you need this flexible demand and essentially storage that the electric and fuel cell vehicles offer. This ensures that their journeys are low carbon journeys, but it also means that if these vehicles are providing that storage capacity, you can accommodate even more renewable energy onto the grid. And if you do that, then you're making the next generation of electric vehicles even cleaner, or the next generation of journeys. So you go around in this positive feedback loop in which electric transport can make the grid cleaner, and the grid can make electric transport cleaner. And as I say, this is all facilitated by price signals that pass through the energy trading market and down to the customer, and encourage behavioral change sometimes, but just encourage sustainable use of the energy at the user end of the system. Okay, no, can you go back to the next slide? That was actually very good timing. So I'm going to look at a more business sort of based approach to that, because that's all a bit high level. The point is, for business, is what does this whole new world of transport offer? And I have to just emphasize that all of this is absolutely in tune with what Leicester City Council is trying to do. So a concept that's sort of gaining credence at the moment is something called mobility as a service, which incorporates a lot of the stuff that that's been talked about both by Steve and by Andrew. So there is appearing to be a general trend away from car ownership or private car ownership, which in so many ways is crazy, because you have an extremely expensive asset that sits on your driveway or in front of your house on the street for probably 95% of its time, which in a business sense is just something that companies wouldn't do with normal assets. And yet we as domestic customers don't think twice about. So there are actually all sorts of reasons why it makes sense not to own a car, or even two cars, as in most households. Instead, I think there will be a blurring of the distinction between private and public transport as we use more public transport, taxis, maybe autonomous or driverless vehicles will come online soon, buses, trains, trams, but particularly pay-as-you-go vehicle hire. So imagine when you choose to get in a car, you step outside your front door. Instead of getting into your own private car, you look at the range of vehicles that are parked out there on the street that are owned by a load of car hire companies, and you choose the particular vehicle that suits you for that particular journey on that particular day. It might be a small, lightweight run around for getting your shopping from nearby supermarket, or it might be something that's for long range, for you to go and visit your Auntie Mabel in Scotland. Those are two different cars, and you would hire one accordingly to what you need that particular journey for. So it's much more efficient for you. It should work out much cheaper than owning a vehicle as well. So mobility as a service is really interesting. It covers, cars, other modes such as transport and such as trains and buses and so on, but also down to like taxis and bike hire and so on. And you can actually link these all together in sort of end-to-end journey planning and ticketing using apps and so on. So it becomes a service delivery of mobility rather than car ownership or bike ownership or buying just a train ticket and then a taxi ticket and so on. Sorry, can we go back? So this is a lot to do with service delivery, but there's a huge amount going on in new opportunities in manufacturing. The whole vehicle market is opening up. Sorry, yes, I'm getting the hurry up sign. The whole vehicle market is completely opening up to new entrants, new manufacturers. I've talked about the energy supply chain. There's plenty of scope for businesses to get into that service delivery. There's things like traffic management, smart logistics, and all sorts of management and infrastructure situations. But I think the really big one that ties all this together is information and communication technology, big data, and monitoring and control. So I'll just look on the last slide, please, at where some of those, I mean, there's just a huge, vast array of ways in which these are important. But in the monitoring and control of that energy supply chain using flexible tariffs and so on, the control of chargers, electrolyzers, vehicle to grid facilities and so on. In vehicles, obviously onboard systems and performance, navigation systems, including vehicle to vehicle sort of autonomy and safety and traffic management, but also in finding chargers or hydrogen refueling services. But again, there is the service delivery side of it around the multimodal journey planning and ticketing across a whole range of travel modes, traffic flow and air quality management, fleet management, and logistics. And these are all opportunities opening up for businesses that may not realize that the low carbon transport sector is an area they can operate in. Certainly these days, there are more opportunities, and I hope that our listeners are inspired by some of these to look into what they can do to contribute.
Okay, thanks so much, Rupert. I think you've given us a lot to think about there. The big picture of how the grid works and how the transport system works, the kind of experiential picture of how we will get around and maybe transitioning from owning a car as individuals or as a household to drawing on lots of types of mobility and all the fast changing technological changes happening around transport that will be impacting upon our lives for sure. So thank you so much. So as you can tell, if you're listening in, we're overrunning a touch, but we're going to allow a bit of time for a couple of questions before we wrap up. So thank you to our speakers for staying on for these. So I think the first one that will come up, actually, just a quick reminder for our speakers to mute your mic at this point, unless you're responding. Okay, so I think the first question is about that's part of the specifics of the transport policies aimed at the folks from the council in particular. I think thinking about buses. So if you could bring up that one. Okay, so thank you, Andrew, for that question. So general thing about our influence on bus companies, particular to enable behaviour change by when services are run. I don't know if Adam maybe wants to respond to that one first, or Andrew?
Yeah, I can start. Andrew might want to chip in. Both leaning on them, but also working very closely with bus operators. We do have more tools at our disposal than we have previously, probably since the mid-80s, and we're looking to develop what's called an enhanced partnership with the bus operators that will support improved services alongside interventions like a workplace parking levy. So there's a whole range of active levers to enable us to improve accessibility to bus, along every tangent.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I think the workplace parking levy is an important additional element to our within our toolbox. First, Arriva, etc., are commercial organisations. They operate on the basis of generating a profit at the end of the day, and services that aren't profitable are services that don't tend to operate unless they have some form of subsidy from the local authority. We do currently subsidise a small number of routes. And I think the opportunity is there to look again at that. This is a question that's come up in a number of forums we've been talking to. That question of shift times, is it part of a connection to a core bus network, or is it something that can be served through demand responsive transport? You may be aware of the Arriva Click service that operates to the west of the city. That is funded by developers, actually through developments, and it's time limited. So, is that a solution? Can that be brought to bear to support some of those businesses that are going to have to contribute through the workplace parking levy? So I think it stands to reason that we need to support them to help them with their business, help them get their staff to work in the most sustainable way possible.
Excellent. Thanks both. And I've got one more question that I'll offer, and I'm going to invite everyone to share their thoughts on this one, which is around the future of cities in general. I wonder if that one could be brought up. Hopefully something's happening behind the scenes, some fevered copying and pasting. If not, I'll just pose it to you directly. So the question was around, it may appear as I'm speaking, but what we're seeing post-COVID is many people looking to work from home now and continue to work from home. Here we go. And so one implication could be that spending during the day may be more where people live, which may be more in villages and towns, so people not commuting into Leicester. And I think this raises a wider point around the future of cities and the future of Leicester in particular, and how that might impact upon some of the travel-based strategies we're developing. And I'd welcome any reflections around that kind of new post-COVID world of how we're living and the implications for travel and how that might affect what could be good strategies or not. Anyone want to contribute? I think Adam maybe wants to dive in first as well.
Go on, no, yeah, happy to dive in first always. Interesting. Obviously, we don't often think about villages in the city of Leicester, but actually Leicester has villages surrounding it that have been taken in by the city. And they are our neighbourhoods, as our estates are our neighbourhoods. And it falls into this 15-minute city concept, actually. We're not just thinking about a city centre, we're thinking about connectivity between neighbourhoods. Ayleston, Knighton, Evington, Belgrave, Humberston were all villages once, and we want those to operate as service providers in communities, I guess, in communities. So the city centre is reinventing itself, not just in Leicester, globally. probably too. And the concept of a city centre as a space for retail is disappearing, and we see the city centre's new role partly as a neighbourhood, and we do feel that people will see the convenience of a city centre somewhere that they want to live, not only to visit. And I think the future of city centres is as a neighbourhood. Obviously, there are rural demands that we need to look at in terms of the climate agenda, but for a city like Leicester, way into the future, and we'll have those challenges that we need to address.
Thank you, and that's a nice link to the 15-minute neighbourhood concept that I think you spoke about in the strategy. Would anyone else like to come in on this point?
But perhaps just to say that I think, in terms of home working, there's a lot of commentary on that at the moment. I think the jury's out as to quite what that's going to look like going forward. My best guess is there will be, a significant increase in home working. Those people working at home will want, may not necessarily be able to work from home, but they might want to work from community hubs, for instance. And I think that sort of picks up Adam's point about looking at these local neighbourhoods and seeing them as in a different way, where connectivity within neighbourhoods, these 15-minute city sort of concepts are and will become much more important. I think the fact that more people will be home working, though, doesn't necessarily mean that it does away with the problem of congestion on our streets in the city at peak times. As I noted, the city is facing a very substantial increase in growth within the city and on the outskirts of the city over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And I think, we need to be planning ahead for that. We need to understand that will cause us difficulties. So I think we are thinking very carefully about a post-COVID world. There's still a little bit of thinking to go on that, I'm quite sure, as trends unfold. But, we will be looking over the next few months before we publish the final plan, picking up the latest trends and building in any reflection into our new plan.
Thank you. And I've just got time for one or two more quick comments. Lisa, you want to chip in?
Can I come back on that? Or not on that specifically, but the question in general. I think if cities are going to sort of evolve and naturally reconfigure themselves, not just because of COVID, but just the way they are naturally going even before COVID happened. We're going to probably have to redefine what a city is, and I like this idea that the city centre is going to become more of a neighbourhood, and that seems to make sense to me, although I expect it will become also an important leisure zone because it's less of a retail zone. But perhaps following on from that would be the opportunity to increase the green spaces and open spaces and vehicle-free spaces in the middle of the city. It has health benefits as well as environmental benefits, and I think that maybe as cities evolve, it would be good to grasp that opportunity to do that. The other point I would like to make, as someone who commutes in from a surrounding village, that for me the city doesn't end where the sort of urban spread ends. I feel very much that as a regular commuter into the city, I am part of the city because I work here, and there is a huge problem about transport from the surrounding villages into the city centre. I don't know whether Leicester City Council feels that's part of their problem or not. But as a resident, it feels like it.
Thanks, Rupert. And I think timing-wise, if Lucy or Steve have a quick comment, I want to give you the floor. Otherwise, time to wrap up. Steve is shuffling within Zen.
I was just going to say that what Andrew said, I think, is right, in that it's too early to say what the impact is going to be. But we are social animals, and having been sat at this desk for the last 18 months plus, I'm itching to get back into the workspace. So maybe I'm one of a minority of one, but I think that's likely to happen. And it might be a flexible working pattern, but there will be a desire to go back into the city centre.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. Apologies that we've overrun. I'm conscious Adam needs to get away ASAP, so please feel free to vanish, Adam, if you need to. And thank you for joining us. And thank you, everyone on the panel, for your contributions. Obviously, this is a big discussion and debate. It'll be ongoing, for decades. But over the coming few weeks, please respond to the consultation if you're eligible, and share your views. Because this is all about the future of where we live and work, and really important issues are at stake. I think just to wrap up, just final thanks for people you can't see. So Sian and Tammy have been behind the scenes convening this event and helping with the technical side. So thank you so much to them. And also just a little plug, we're going to have various events at De Montfort over the coming few months. Linked to the COP26 talks, we're doing an events program for our staff and students, but also for the wider community. So look out for DMU events for news about upcoming events happening there. I think that's all. Thank you for joining us, and have a good evening.
Thank you.